near and give your attendance, and you shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Court is now open. Please be seated.
Good morning, sir.
SJC-10650, Commonwealth versus Mendes.
The clock's now.
Good morning, Mr. Gallavoy.
Morning.
On behalf of your appellant, Joseph Mendes, Robert Gallavoy, this matter comes to your attention this morning based on an incident that occurred down at the town of Bourne in February 2007. In and around that time, a detective from the Barnstable Police Department had filed an application for a search warrant in his local district court, that is the Barnstable District Court. And of course, in filing that application, he submitted an affidavit in support thereof. Throughout that affidavit, he noted a series of observations made by members of the investigating authorities, police authorities, as well as including some information gained from a named confidential informant, or a named informant, excuse me. Every single observation noted in that affidavit to get the search warrant occurred within the town of Bourne. Each one.
Why doesn't 276 Section 1 answer this question of whether that court had jurisdiction?
I would suggest that 276 Section 1 certainly is applicable. However, Your Honor, I would suggest there are other statutes that also apply to this particular scenario. I would suggest for the court's consideration that in the language of 276.1, where it suggests a clerk, a justice can issue a search warrant for anywhere within the boundaries of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, there's got to be a predicate.
Why?
The predicate is that there must have been some criminal activity that took place.
Well, for sure, there has to be probable cause. I mean, all of that has to be satisfied.
Defense attorney, I certainly agree with you there. However, the criminal activity must have taken place within the jurisdiction of the court issuing the process.
Why?
Why?
Under Chapter 218, Section 1, it specifically states under that section that district courts enjoy jurisdictions over particular towns. This particular matter, Section 1 indicates that the Barnstable District Court has jurisdiction over Sandwich,
But isn't
Barnstable,
that to
Young.
adjudicate cases?
I'm sorry?
To adjudicate cases.
Correct. And when, in adjusting Justice Cordy's inquiry, when you take Section 276, Section 1, and you also take Chapter 218, Section 35, it specifically indicates in Section 35 that the court must have jurisdiction over the trial or over the trial matter. In this case, anything coming from the town of Bourne would go to the Falmouth District Court. And again, that's in accordance with Chapter 218, Section 1.
Could I just ask you this? I think it's maybe in the amicus brief or maybe in the Commonwealth's brief, but if someone is, the state police and local police are investigating murder,
Yes.
and they need a search warrant or seek a search warrant,
Yes.
well, the district court, any district court, doesn't have jurisdiction over that. So, but they go to the district court, the local district court, in order to, and the magistrate issues a search warrant. And the matter is could only be prosecuted within the Superior Court.
Ultimately, yes. The Superior Court of
Well,
Falmouth.
it can only be prosecuted there.
Correct. And I just trying to clarify the question, Your Honor. When you ask the police officer, indicate the police officer go to the local district court, is that the local district court within the jurisdiction of where the homicide occurred, or where you're indicating perhaps there is
Well, you just said, I thought you were just saying that the key here is, does the district court have jurisdiction over the case that's issuing the search warrant? And I'm just suggesting to you that there are cases that no district court has jurisdiction over.
Correct. I think that's under Section 26, if I recall correctly. I would agree. However, I think it's at least concurrent jurisdiction in the beginning. It doesn't have final jurisdiction. Under 218, Section 26, it indicates that the district court has final jurisdiction over certain crimes. and the Superior Court only enjoys final jurisdiction over the remaining crimes. So the district court would still have jurisdiction, concurrent jurisdiction, to issue process initially, of course, but ultimately, in a situation such as murder, only the Superior Court has jurisdiction.
What was, the warrant was returned where? To the Barnstable District Court?
Technically all four, Your Honor. There were 2 warrants for 2 separate residences from the town of
Right.
Bourne. After they executed those, they seized a car lawfully, that we were not quibbling with the recovery of a car from one of the residences. And they brought it to the local Bourne Police Department. And again, they sought ultimately 2 search warrants for the vehicle from the Barnstable District Court.
Okay, but the returns on those warrants were filed where?
Barnstable District Court.
Okay, so your position is that the probable cause has to relate to criminal activity in that district?
I would humbly suggest that, yes, to answer your question directly.
So if there is a crime that occurs in Boston and there appears to be reason to believe that the person has a summer home in Barnstable, and they're investigating in Barnstable, they would have to go back to Boston to get a search warrant to return to Barnstable to search that house? That's what you say the law requires?
If the individual is himself in the town of Barnstable and the incident itself occurred within Suffolk County, if you will, certainly I would think an arrest warrant would issue out of the city
I'm
of
referring to a
Boston.
search warrant. I'm assuming that there may be evidence of the crime that is at the summer home in Barnstable. So they're looking for a search warrant, not an arrest warrant. Arrest warrant's a different statute.
Correct.
So you'd say they'd have to go back to Boston to the district where the crime occurred, or where there was, I mean, crimes may occur in various districts. There could be preparation in one district, travel through another.
Correct.
Consummation in a third, and conduct after the offense in a fourth. So which one are we supposed to choose here?
I would suggest under that scenario, Your Honor, that the Barnstable District Court can clearly issue a search warrant for the residents within its jurisdiction to apprehend the individual that has an arrest warrant.
I'm referring to a search warrant, not an arrest warrant. So you, I mean,
Right.
So you're saying if it's where the crime occurred or the location of the place to be searched?
Under those, yes, the Barnstable District Court could issue a search warrant under those circumstances that you just articulated for the residents in Barnstable where they're trying to locate a murder suspect.
Okay, so where the crime, where the acts constituting probable cause occurred,
Yes.
or where the location of the place to be searched is. Either of those courts would have jurisdiction.
I would indicate yes.
Well, why doesn't that hypothetical cover the situation?
Because in this particular case, Judge, I'd suggest there was absolutely no criminal activity afoot within the district of Barnstable.
But I thought you just answered Justice Cordy. Justice Gantz asked you, probable cause has to relate to the criminal activity in that district, and you said yes, and then Justice Cordy added, or the location of the place to be searched.
Well, under Justice Cordy's inquiry or Justice Gantz, it would have been the Falmouth District Court that would have jurisdiction under that scenario because Bourne falls within Falmouth. Here, quite candidly, you had a local Barnstable detective, I'm suggesting, just went to his local district court. The body was in Bourne. All of the criminal activity that was observed occurred in Bourne. The things to be searched were in Bourne. There was nothing, I mean, literally nothing, tying it into Barnstable, except for that happened to be the locus where the police officer worked.
But in Justice Gantz's hypothetical, it seems to me that you still haven't answered his question. If it's a homicide and a hammer was used, there's nothing illegal about possession of a hammer.
Right.
And the defendant or the accused is living in Barnstable. It's his second home. The crime occurred in Boston. And the hammer happens to be, they have reason to, probable cause to believe that the hammer is in the house in Boston, in Barnstable. Barnstable does not have jurisdiction over the crime. The hammer is there.
I agree. And I
So
disagree in the sense that
how do you read these statutes to say that Barnstable has jurisdiction?
Respectfully, Judge, your scenario is different from the one just offered. You're now placing physical evidence in Barnstable. under this scenario, the Boston courts would have authority to issue a search warrant for a Barnstable residence, I would suggest, because some criminal activity, the homicide, took place within the city limits of Boston.
But would the Barnstable court have jurisdiction to issue a search warrant?
I would say, under these circumstances, perhaps concurrently, yes, they
Why?
could.
Under what authority?
The suspect himself is technically on the run, I would suggest, under your circumstances. He's hiding himself in, actually...
He's not, it's just the hammer is
in.
in Barnstable. The hammer, the murder weapon is a hammer. It's not illegal to possess.
Right.
They have probable cause to believe that the hammer is in Barnstable. The defendant is in Italy. Does the Barnstable court have the authority to issue a search warrant to get the hammer?
I would suggest that Boston clearly...
No, Barnstable. Forget Boston, other than the fact that the crime occurred there.
But there's evidence relating to Barnstable, yes, then both courts under that scenario...
Under what theory does Barnstable have jurisdiction under your
There's
under
evidence,
your argument?
There's probable cause to believe that there is evidence related to a criminal act.
Yeah, but Barnstable does not have jurisdiction over the crime, and that seems to be your theory.
No, respectfully, Judge, it is not my theory, respectfully. You could have concurrent jurisdiction over the act and where you may have physical evidence. Here, there was nothing.
Where do you see that in the statute?
When you read 276, Section 1, in conjunction with 218.35, in conjunction with 218, Section 1.
Well, do that reading. Run me through the logic of that.
Absolutely. Starting with the first one, I guess, 218, Section 1. That's the statute that defines this district court enjoys jurisdiction over these three towns. When you get to Section...
Which does not include Barnstable, because the crime occurred.
Does not include Bourne.
All right.
Okay. It is Barnstable, Yarmouth, and Sandwich. So that's Section 1. Then you get to Section 35 that talks about the issuance of search warrants, the powers, the authorities enjoyed by the district court to issue search warrants. It also indicates in that statute that it must be returnable to the court that has jurisdiction over the trial. That's the language in the statute, Your Honor. So when you're reading Section 1 in conjunction with Section 35, then I'm certainly arguing there must have been something that occurred within the province of the issuing district court. When you get to 276, Section 1, where it quite clearly indicates that district court personnel, judges and clerks, assistant clerks, have the authority to issue a statewide, essentially, search warrant, that is under the assumption from 218, Section 1 and 218, Section 35, that the issuing court had some jurisdiction over the matter to begin with, or somewhere along the line. Here, we just don't have that at all. There is nothing that went back to Barnstable District Court regarding this case. Nothing before it outlined or articulated in the affidavit, nothing afterwards.
I'm sorry, you said, what section were you referring to that relates to where warrants are returned? Because I don't, did you say it was?
Is that in your brief?
It's in 218,
Yeah,
Section
is that
35.
in your brief,
I don't-
21835?
I see Section 33, but
Yeah,
not
me too.
35.
Yeah.
It's actually, I want to say, it's certainly submitted in the amicus brief. I read that this morning.
But it's not in the-
21835, and I believe my brother may have cited it as well. 218, Section 35.
So why can't the return be made to the district court, to a different district court?
My understanding, the return is to be made pursuant to 276, Section 1 et al., to the issuing court.
So you can make a return to both courts.
Under the statute, I believe it needs to be returned to the issuing court.
No,
In
it
this
says-
case,
It says
Barnstable.
made returnable before a court or trial justice having jurisdiction of the trial or examination of the person charged with the crime, if you're talking about Section 35.
Section 35. Okay, under those circumstances, and in this case, it still was not brought to the Falmouth Court. It was returned to the Barnstable District Court. I remember that quite clearly from...
Why would it be
Yeah, okay.
sensible for us to apply your interpretation? We don't have, you could arguably, under the Commonwealth's interpretation, search for the right county, for the right judge, or the right magistrate.
Right.
But we don't have Leon, in this Commonwealth, so it's not a good faith standard, it's a probable cause standard upon review. So it wouldn't do you that much good to go without probable cause, because you would just lose on the motion to suppress or lose on appeal. So why should we interpret it your way?
Well, I would certainly agree to get a search warrant from the outset. You need to have established some sort of probable cause that an independent magistrate could have reviewed. I think this court would agree with me that in reviewing the application and reviewing the affidavit, there must be a determination of some credibility of the paperwork being presented to you for the issuance of the search warrant. Who better, Your Honor, who better to know the players involved and the lay of the land than those in their local district courts?
But district court judges move around almost every day, every week, so they could be in different districts depending on which week it is.
Their clerks certainly do not. The presiding justices respectfully do not. And more often than not, you generally have the same justices showing with the district court. I do acknowledge there are justices that move around within the region, the circuit judges.
Are you making a credibility of the affiant, the police officer who swears the affidavit?
Yes. The reviewing magistrate just can't take his or her word. There may be more to it. There may be, the magistrate is the person that's local, knows the area, and needs to make a particular determination. See, I'm out of time.
Go ahead. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Galloway.
Thank you.
Mr. Moriarty?
Good morning, Madam Chief Justice. Good morning, Your Honors. My name is Robert Moriarty. I'm here representing the Commonwealth. I'm an assistant district attorney in the Cape and Islands DA's office. I'd like to preface my remarks that Your Honors are presented with three alternatives here. You have, as you just heard from the defendant, his interpretation. You have our position, which restricts, which is somewhat restrictive and imposes a restraint on a clerk magistrate's power to issue a warrant. And then you have the position of the amicus, which does not limit the power of a clerk magistrate at all. With respect to our position...
Well, excuse me, on your position, as I understand it, your position is that Section 32 helps you. But why isn't Section 32 addressed only to the apprehension of persons charged with a crime and not to the issuance of search warrants?
Oh, I agree with that. I agree that that interpretation is entirely plausible. I would just like to say that we took a very conservative approach to our position in this case. We looked at 32 as part of the statutory scheme with respect to the power of clerks to issue warrants, whether they be arrest warrants or whether they be search warrants. I understand that 32 is addressed to warrants. 33 is specifically mentioned search warrants.
Yeah, but usually when the statutes speak, they say search warrants when they mean search warrant. And
Yes.
It seems clear the legislature knows warrants apart from search warrants. And when they just say warrants, they mean arrest warrants.
Yes.
So in 32, they talk about warrants. They don't talk about search warrants. May receive complaints and issue warrants and other process for apprehension of persons charged with the crime and found within their county.
Yes, and we took that position because if Your Honors see in the statutes, interpret the statutes to limit in any way the power of a clerk magistrate to issue a warrant, that limitation, just the authorization, not whether or not where they can issue it, because I believe 276(1) controls on that. If the search warrant, that being said, if a clerk magistrate, if the crime occurs in Barnstable, a search
In the county.
in the
I
county,
understand
or in
your
the county,
position.
in Barnstable County,
Yeah. Let me-
clerk magistrate can issue a search warrant for any location within the borders of the Commonwealth or territorial waters thereof.
Could I?
Neither,
No, you go.
neither you or the defendant cite 218, Section 35.
Yes.
Obviously, amicus does, and it's a little confusing, I think, with respect to where search warrants are returnable. What does that section tell us, in your view, about the power of a district court to issue a search warrant that may be returnable to some other court?
I believe it says it's returnable before a court or trial justice having jurisdiction of the trial or examination of the person charged with the crime.
That's a little awkward.
So-
It is.
So what would that mean in this case? Because if it was returned to Barnstable, but the person charged with the crime and everything else, as I understand it, was in Bourne, what does the return mean in this case?
I believe that the search warrant might have been transferred from the Barnstable District Court once it was returned to the Falmouth District Court.
But that's not usually what returnable means. Returnable
That's
means
correct.
when it is returned by the
You mean
officer.
that could have been an error? Is that what you're saying?
That could have been an error, but as Your Honors have indicated in your decisions regarding the return of search warrants,
That's
those-
not a reason to suppress.
Why would the officer have gone to the court to which he went in this case?
well, the officer had been investigating the Mendes family for upwards of 9 years, since April of 1999. Numerous members of that family had gone to prison, and numerous associates of them have gone to federal prison. Mr. Mendes basically took over control of the family business, and he was being investigated in Hyannis. He was aware of that investigation. Because of that investigation, he decided to move to Bourne, where he thought the investigation might not follow him. The officer, Lieutenant
How do we
Balcom-
know that?
Well, we don't. But, I believe that
It's in the affidavit.
In the affidavit.
Search warrant. Yes.
he received some information from a confidential informant stating that he had moved to Bourne in order to get away from that investigation. I want to say off the top of my head, it's either in the first or second or third numbered paragraph of the affidavit.
It's in the affidavit.
Okay, so why did they go, finish answering my question if you would, please. Why did the officer go to the court that he went to?
I don't know exactly what he was thinking, but he believed that that clerk magistrate had the power to issue the search warrant. And he had gone to that clerk magistrate before. And it was convenient for him because it's 8 minutes from the police station.
Is it a common practice to go to a court outside of the jurisdiction to issue outside of the jurisdiction of the crime or of the locus to be searched to get a search warrant? I had never heard of it.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily common, but it's happened. There are numerous cases. I believe the amicus cites two cases that Suffolk County has. I'm aware of other cases in Barnstable County where this has happened.
Well, from the citations from the amicus, it's not entirely clear that nothing occurred in the district court. I understand that there were search warrants issued in different jurisdictions, but it's not clear from the recitation of the instance, nor it's no requirement that it be made clear as to exactly why one of them was obtained in Revere, and I forget the other one.
There was one out of the Plymouth District Court.
Right.
Now, there's a separate docket kept for the issuance of search warrants, isn't there?
I believe so, yes.
And it's kept by in the court where the search warrant was issued.
Yes.
Is it feasible to order, or at least to have a rule that requires the return of the warrant to be made in two places, to the issuing court and to the court where the criminal process will issue?
For the sake of clarity, I believe that might be helpful. As I believe what happened in this case, once he was charged initially in the Falmouth District Court, and he was subsequently indicted in the Barnstable Superior Court.
Can I just ask you a timing question there? He was charged before the search warrant is issued?
No, after, as a result of the execution of of the search warrant, he was.
And then there was a superseding indictment.
Then there was an indictment, yes.
Could I ask you an unrelated question that I should know the answer to, but since no one raised this, there's no issue about a police officer who's investigating, in this case, a Barnstable officer, correct?
Correct.
Investigating this crime and seeking a search warrant to search in Bourne? That's not a problem?
That's correct. I understand that's outside the record, but I did anticipate that question. I spoke to Lieutenant Balcom. He indicated to me that he is cross-sworn as a Barnstable County Deputy Sheriff, and thus had authority to be in Warren. Whether or not that is a question, it's not raised by the defendant.
No, it's
But
not
it's a
raised by
separate
anybody.
question, because presumably if the Bourne Police Department thought that somebody was investigating activities without jurisdiction to do so, that's where that would arise,
Yes,
not the search warrant.
yes. If there are no further questions, I would rest on my brief.
Thank you, Mr. Moriarty.
Thank you, Judge.